is the Andy rig. And you'll see, very similar, here's a lot of the controls that you just saw. As we're creating our stuff, you're kind of going by obviously what I recommended. Like it needs hand controls, it needs an elbow control, it needs a neck control. As you get into doing your own rigs, you'll kind of find out how each one is very specific as to what, or not very specific, very general as to how you would put stuff in there. And so some rigs you'll find don't have every control. Like Andy has a collarbone control here, and Andy has a shoulder control, oops, there. Come on. Okay, and there's an elbow control. And then also on the Andy rig, I can change this so that it's not using those circles anymore. The circles are gone. Now I'm using this box. And so now instead of me using forward kinematics to rotate the arm into position, I'm using inverse kinematics to move it around. Okay? So as we're creating these rigs, just keep in mind that a lot of the stuff that we're doing is very basic compared to the world of rigging is a huge thing. If you were scared of expressions before, here's what the expressions look like in the Andy. Just ignore that one. That one's a simple one. There it is. So here's a bunch of expressions that are inside here. Now these are pretty simple and straightforward, but there's a lot of stuff that's obviously inside of them. Same thing with this eye blink one. Basically it's just linking the two eyes together. Okay, and there's the eyes there, yes. So Andy has an eye controller, so I can control where Andy's looking. And you'll see, as I move this around, you can see that our eyelids are also moving, right? So that's built into the rig, so that as an animator, I don't have to worry about, okay, Andy's looking up, I need to raise the eyebrow lids. As Andy's looking down, I need to lower the eyebrow lids, okay? I can still do that if I needed to tweak this further, right? So Andy's looking like that. That's too much. I don't think Andy has a blink though, so I'd have to manually animate a blink. And I also believe Andy doesn't have iris controls, so I can't control Andy's irises. Okay, this one has like a hip control, and it has a individual waist control. So in case I needed to individually control the waist, I could do that too. All right, so our next assignment after the robot is going to be this Chickster thing. So on Canvas, under the modules, you'll download the Chickster zip. You'll save it, rename it. Don't use my name on there. And then you will open it up. I have to go into my right folder, which is here, there. So I'm going to skimp through the settings for this, the way it's set up. The videos are already up there for the whole thing, so I'm not going to walk you through each part of this in class. So the biggest challenge with this one is we don't have, the first part at least, is we don't have something very exact of how he's going to be rotating around, right? So like the robot, it was obvious. That's the joint that rotates, so that's where the pivot would be. Here we have to kind of, in our minds and you know, kind of visually in our actual legs and arms and whatever, try to figure out where things actually bend from, right? So here's his knee. So his knee would basically be bending from like the middle here. It might be a little bit above this, it might be a little bit below it. We don't have to be as accurate. If it's way up here though, that's not going to work. Even if it's right there, it's still not going to work. We want to get it pretty close to about there. Same thing for the hip area. We have an actual hip here. He will move around, but there's not an exact spot for it. Sometimes you'll have to put it in a spot and say, does this work? Yes or no? I'll move it, and then figure that out. All of the rigs that you do for this are going to be exactly like that when you do something organic. I'm going to go to modeling or rigging, drop in a joint. I'm going to throw in a first joint right in the middle. So that's the center of him-ish. I'm going to go to my side view, and I'm going to drop in a joint right about here. I'm going to drop in one right about at the knee, and then right about there at the bottom. Then I'm going to switch to my top view. You'll see how I'm switching around a whole lot. And just so you can see, this is not inside the leg. I'm going to need to obviously adjust it. So that's why I'm not too concerned with it at the moment. Right here, I need to get this inside the foot. This only works when it's by one of these lines. So if I put it between lines, it would work, but it would be weird because some points would go to that joint and some points wouldn't. So when I put this next joint in, I'm looking at maybe putting it right here. Let's see, if I go right there, there, and there. Okay, I'm gonna hit the up arrow a couple times to get back to the ankle. And I'll say there, there, and there. Hit the up arrow a couple times. There we go. Now, I could have also just put in 2 joints. That would have worked too. So I could have, let's say, let me unparent this one. Whoops, what happened there? Let me delete this one. I'm going to move this one down. I'm going to undo this in a second. I could have done exactly this. So it's a very similar setup to how the robot was. But this only gives me basically like one toe to rotate. Okay? Way up here, this won't rotate the toe. This only gives me one area to rotate. So I want to have at least these 2 so that I have more room, so that if I needed him to, let's say, grab onto something, I have more articulation. I can grab both of these and have both of those rotate around to grab onto something if he needs to. Or as he's walking, typically they would walk and their toes would like flatten out and then come up, right? So now I have that ability that I could rotate these up as he's walking. Turn my geometry back on. So I'm just going to move all of these into place. And I may need to use the front view, the side view, the whatever view to get them locked into where I need them to be. So like I said, this is going to be about here. Here's the hip joint. That's way too far back. That needs to come up a bit further. Here's the ankle joint. This should come up further. So I'm just holding D and just moving this into place. Let me check the front view and the side view. That's good. I'll check perspective. Good. I'm going to move this up. If I'm just moving joints, I just move it. I don't hit D or anything. I just pick it up and move it. I'm going to put this one, pull it back a little bit. Push that forward a little bit. So you'll see how there's a lot of like on-the-fly decision making that you have to do when you're doing this, because it's not going to be like, there it is, I know how it should move. I'm just moving it. In this case, I'm moving it. If I don't want to move something else, like on the ankle, let's say everything else is good, but the ankle needs to be moved, I'll hold D, and then it'll only move the ankle joint, nothing else. Okay? Otherwise, it's just literally just the regular move tool. All right, I also want these to be somewhat centered. I don't want it to be like off to the side. So I'm just double checking those. Those are good. Okay. Let's go back to the front view. There it is. All right, I'm going to pick up where I left off. So I'm going to grab that joint, go back to my joint tool. And it's not going to let me just pick up where I left off. That's no big deal. Maybe I can middle click. Or click on it, then start drawing. There we go. And again, I'm just adding more joints here. For the neck, the more joints I have, the more flexible that will be. We're going to tweak this after I'm done with it, and then you'll see what I mean by that. When I get to the head part, think of the skull. How many joints do you think are actually in the skull, allowing the head just to move? Just one, right? Just that main one, left and right. So I don't want to put a whole bunch of joints in there. I basically just need this one for where the neck is here, and then maybe I'll just put one way out there, okay? And then if I needed to rotate the head, I could grab this joint and use that as how the head rotates back and forth. Your spine, where does your spine rotate from? the vertebrae, right? So your vertebrae are all in the back of your spine, the back of your back, right? So I wouldn't, the same thing with your neck. That's where it's rotating from. So his spine is running right along here. That's why the joints are so close to that side. If I put them further down there, it could look good, but I think it'll be rotating more from the back. That's what we typically rotate from. For the tail, I'm just going to put a joint here and a joint there. There's no problem having too many joints, but if you have too few joints, then it really becomes an issue later on. Like if you needed to add some more movement, you don't have the ability to do that, okay? All right, so then just like before, we need to go through and I need to adjust all my joints, make sure they're all set up correctly. So I haven't mirrored this yet, obviously. I would mirror that to the other side. The first thing I'm going to do is freeze my transforms. As I'm moving these joints around, you'll see on some of them, I saw it on one of them. There it is. This one has a rotate. All of our joints should be zeroed out for rotation. They'll have position things, but no rotation. So I'm going to grab this middle. I'm going to freeze my transforms. Okay, and then that should get rid of any rotations that I had there. Yes, that's gone. And I'm just using the up and down keys for this. There we go. Whenever you freeze your rotations or freeze anything, you'll see that the pivots now get kind of like wonky. They're not lined up with how they should be lined up. So I'm going to grab the center again, go back to skeleton, go to orient. I'm going to make sure my orient to world is off because I don't want them to orient to world. I want them to figure out how to orient themselves based on the next joint. Okay? When I come back in a second, then I'll orient to the world. So I'm going to say orient. So now each one of these joints here should be oriented to follow to the next one. So that one looks good. This one's good. All right, so let's test it out. So I'm going to grab this one, this one, this one, and that one. I'm going to rotate it backwards. Perfect. Okay, if as I rotated this backwards, maybe one of the joints was rotating forward as the other ones went back, then we're running into the same issue we had in the other one. I would go to the local rotation axes, rotate it around so that it fit. Okay. I'm going to jump down to the feet and check those out too. Those should be the same thing. We just have two joints here. As I rotate them, they should rotate the same way. Perfect. This one and that one. Perfect. And then this one and that one. Perfect. Okay. Let me double check the direction. Okay, this is rotating like off to the side. It's kind of like a wonky direction to go. I think this one's probably doing the same thing. Yep, that's like a weird direction to go. I mean, it's kind of like in towards the center. So I guess that could work. Think of your hand, right? So your hand kind of goes towards the center. It doesn't go like straight down here. That wouldn't work. So I think in this case for the front two, it'll be fine. I don't care for the back one though. The back one's a little bit too far off. So I'm just going to grab this, go to component mode, go to my question marks, and just switch to the top view and just try to line that up so it's straight. That's all. So I'm just going to go rotate. You can see the eye that's in the middle of the joint here. I'm just closing that eye. So you can see the middle of this looks like an eye. Just closing that off. And this doesn't have to be perfect because it's not a robotic thing. We have a little bit of play here. So now I'll double check it, make sure it still works. Cool, that works good. And then these two, like I said, I'm fine with that kind of rotating towards the center. I just don't want the other ones to be like that. All right, let's see this. That should be fine there, that should be fine there. Okay, so now I'm going to take this joint here, and this one I am going to go to my orient, say orient to the world, but don't orient any of the children, okay? If I do this, it'll orient all the other joints in the chain. We only want that one joint to be oriented to the world. Okay? And again, double check. It's better safe than sorry, like I always say. Yep, okay, still good there. All of these should be good. This one here, I'm going to orient this one to the world also, because as he rotates his head, that's not to the world at all. Where are you going? Not oriented to the world. All right, we'll just do that one manually also, because I don't like the way that one's rotating. I want this one to be pretty much straight so that he can rotate his head left and right. So in this case, I'm going to make sure that green line is perfectly straight. Good. And again, it's not perfectly straight, and it's close enough. So now I can take this and rotate it side to side, and that should be pretty good for how he rotates his head. This back here doesn't matter. This will be used for something else later on when we're doing the tail feathers. All right, so then I would go through, rename all my stuff. I'm not going to do that in this case. I'm going to mirror my joints. If I labeled something on the one side left, I would mirror it so that it renamed everything right, so I don't have to worry about it. This is going to be mirrored in the XY plane. Hit OK. All right, so now let me go back to unisolate that. Okay, so now I'm going to take this and make it all function together. So if I grab the skin, I grab the joints, and I go to skin, bind skin. This is where all of this is going to happen. So I'm going to say joint hierarchy. That means every single joint in that area that I've selected. So if I selected the root, it'll grab all the joints that are connected to the root. That's what that means. The bind method, I'm going to set it to geodesic voxel. If you want to know specifically what each one of these do, definitely check out the help. These are just the ones that I found work best for this situation. Okay. The idea here is that the robot, when we took a piece of geometry and we took a joint, the joint 100% affected the geometry. So when the joint rotated 50 degrees, that piece of geometry rotated 50. Because we only have one piece of geometry here, we can't do that. So what it does is it's going to connect the points to the joints. And how it does it is this right here, this geodesic voxel. This is how it decides which points are going to be controlled by which joints. And then for the skinning method, I believe classic linear worked fine. Otherwise, I would choose dual quaternion. And again, you can look what those mean. All the other settings should be good. I don't need to worry about anything else. So I just set this to geodesic, classic linear, and then hit bind. So now what it does is it connects the geometry to the joints, so that as I were to grab these and rotate them, you can see that now he is deforming, and we're able to move him. Now this is where some of that advanced rigging stuff comes in. If this was a human and I did this, your butt may squish in a little bit, but it would actually like hold more shape than this is. This looks like just like a water balloon or something, the way it's like pushing in, right? And then the chest is kind of like caving in. That body wouldn't do that. Right, we have like hips right here, so those would hold out better, all right? So for this, we're going to be forgiving. It's our first time doing something like that. Same thing with these things down here. Let's check them out and see if they work. Yep, they definitely work. Let's grab these. I'm just going to grab one at a time and rotate. That's good. That's good. And I'm doing them one at a time for a very specific reason, because I want to see if anything else is being affected by these joints. What could happen is, if I have joints in my hand and this joint is supposed to be for this finger, sometimes points that are over here on my middle finger or my ring or whatever will somehow get connected to those joints. So when I rotate my index finger, points over here start moving. And if it doesn't happen, if I don't see it, I'll make it do that so that you can then see that it does it. Okay, it looks like everything is going good there. That's fine. Let's go here. I'm going to grab this, this. And we'll go. Good. Okay, that's good there. All right, so I'm not seeing anything crazy happening. So let me go and make something crazy happen just so you can see what it's going to look like. Oops, I'm going to right click on the skin. Nope, I'm going to go up to skin and say paint skin weights tool. Where are you at? There he is. All right. So if these were labeled, I would definitely see labels inside there. I didn't label anything, so I don't see labels. Let's see, that's the head here. Let's try 2. There we go. Okay. So what this is showing is how much each one of these areas is being affected by that joint. So when I selected this, it's showing me that middle joint right here. Where it's super white, that's the 100% affected by that joint. Where it's black, it's not affected at all. And where it's in between, it's partly affected by it, okay? So ideally what we would have here is when I have this joint selected, nothing over here shows up white. For the demo, we will replace these values with white. Okay, so now I'm going to switch back to my move tool or my rotate tool. As I rotate this, watch what happens to the front. You can see how it's moving. Okay, these joints are affecting the points over there. It's typically never this drastic that it's going to affect the whole part of the foot. Usually what happens, that's a weird error to get. Usually what happens is it's only like a few points. I'm going to go back in here. I'm going to find out that joint is this. Yes, that one there. And I'm just going to repaint these so that they are solid white. Okay, so should you get the problem where I didn't have it, but should you get that problem, you can just grab the joints and adjust it. Yep, you can see this is typically what you'll get. See how it's barely moving there, so that means that I didn't select it or get rid of it fully. Oops. Let's click the skin, go to Paint Skin Weights tool, make sure I'm selected on that joint, yes. And then I'm replacing this with a value of 1. And this is the hard part, is that you can't really see it, but it wasn't fully at 1 right there. Now at any point we can adjust this. So even if you don't realize it until you're like halfway done, we can still fix that. There you go. It's still affecting it a little bit. Now at the very least, like let's say you really screwed this up, you can click on the geometry or the joints, go to bind pose, and what this does is it jumps back to where you originally bound it, okay, when we made it like affecting the skin. Then I can unbind it, then I can do any adjustments I need, and then go back to rebind it, and then it'll rebind the geometry and everything will be back to the way it originally was. Okay. Let me hit undo. There we go. So this isn't affecting it. Nope. Okay. So now let me bind it again so we can see that again. Bind skin. Okay. So look at the neck here. So if we go here and grab these joints by the neck and I rotate them, you can see I hit 3. As I rotate this is a pretty smooth transition on the neck. Okay, it's nice and rounded. I'm going to undo my binding. Yes, good. And I'm going to get rid of some of these joints. So I'm just going to unparent it here. I'll delete this one, delete that one, and I'll keep that one. Oops. I'll make sure I parent it in the correct order. There we go. So now we'll bind this again. Okay, so now with fewer joints in the neck, when I grab this and I go to rotate it, you'll see that I don't get that same flexibility. There aren't enough joints in there for me to create a nice rounding neck there. So I have to make sure that I have enough points or enough joints inside the neck so that as I want to rotate this back, that I don't get this kind of like weird thing happening. So I should have a good amount. Now you can go into overkill by having maybe like too many joints. So if I went here and went like this, that's way too many joints. Okay? The joints are only going to affect where the points are. So if I were to put that many joints, it doesn't do any good because the points that are here and the points that are there can only be affected by one of those joints. Okay, so it's just a matter of maybe putting a joint here, there, 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 and there. okay? So at each one of those rows. Now for this, you'll create the same kind of rig that you created before. So you'll use curves from Illustrator, curves that you build inside Maya, however you want to do that. You'll use set driven to control the feet. So you'll have these little claw controls. You'll also have another control that you can use. Oops, I should have oriented those to the world. Good thing I've unbound this. Orient to the world. There we go. And the same thing for you. There you go. You'll have another control for these so that obviously you can rotate this. And you'll have a control so that you can use your IK handle here to there and pick this up and move it as you need to, okay? Typically when you're looking at legs and you're looking at arms, typically they're going to be done with an IK setup. With the robot, we used IK on the arms so that we can move them in, and then we use FK on the feet. For this, we're using IK on the feet, and then we're going to use IK on the feet, and we're going to use FK up here. Okay, so basically we'll be able to grab the joints for the neck and rotate them around so that our creature can turn his head side to side and whatever. We'll also be introducing an extra way that we can control these things, which is done using Maya hair. Create curves. Okay, this is an exaggeration. This is not how big it's going to be. We want to have some control of how these things move, okay? So we could put joints in each one of those and manually move it, but it's a lot of extra work. So what we're going to do is implement dynamics into this. So I'm going to use a curve that I just created. I'm going to make this curve dynamic right there. And then when I hit play, it's hard to see, but it animates a little bit. Okay, I'm going to grab that curve, and inside here I'm going to set the pin to just the base. And hopefully that's the right one. There it goes. So now this is dynamic. And what we're going to do eventually is attach this dynamic curve to our pieces of geometry so that when the bird moves left or moves right, that curve just kind of follows along it. It's a dynamic piece of geometry that'll move, or a curve that'll move, and then that will affect each one of these things. Okay? And then let me show you what that's going to look like when we're done. Chickster joints, Chickster animation. Okay, so this is a Chickster. He's all rigged. You can see he has his eye controller right here. And he also has a blink, so we set it up so that he can blink. I can grab the head area here and rotate this. I can grab the back and rotate this. I have the neck, oops, so I can rotate this. Here's one for the hips. Here's one for the ankle. And some rotations. More movements, more rotations. Okay, so just like the other one, you're going to animate, or you're going to rig them first, and then you'll just animate a scene showing off all of the stuff. That was odd. Where did that go? He did implode, yeah. That's weird. Let's reopen him up and see if he will not implode next time. Maybe. It's already done it today. Nope. He's naked. What happened to you, guy? That's something else. No, it's not a huge deal. I'm just going to import him again. And this is what's nice about the with the binding is that all I have to do is go back to that startup one. Maybe. I know, it's just gone. Where are you at? It should be right here. That's a good question. Does it show up in the render? Yeah, he's there. It just doesn't want to show up. All right, let's go to X-ray joints off. Use default material. No. All right, fine. Maybe I just have it already in here. Chickster images. There we go. All right, so then you're going to have an animation of him working through his controls. There's 1 foot. Okay, then I have one for the other one. Now all the stuff you're seeing here with like on top of his head and his tail feathers back there, that's all dynamic movement. That's all using that end hair to create that kind of movement. This is a little bit stiffer. This is a little bit softer. I think that's all I have with that one. Yes, that's just random stuff. Okay, so once you're done with your robot or your robot's rendering, you can start working on the Chickster. All the videos are up here. I also have, not in this file obviously because it's not working. I have the UVs laid out, so if you decided that you wanted, there are no, he is like, that's it right there. Maya needs to be rebooted, yeah. All the UVs are laid out, so if you did want to jump into texture painting software and paint the texture on him, you definitely could do that as well, okay? If you wanted to make it look like a creature, I would steer away from substance, and I would start to play with Mari painting textures. It's not terribly difficult to learn if you've had some experience with it, but typically creature stuff is done in Mari just because you're able to go in there and actually just paint right on top of the creature. Cool, questions? Yes, sir.